All my kinfolk is too honored to stay deceased.
All right, look at you.
Rejected. Either place.
Wondered if I had gotten it.
We don't want it. We don't want to do it.
so much, Oscar, for that wonderful music. And good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. My name is Jason Slaughter. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm your worship associate here at this church for today's service. Over the last few years, the way we have met has often changed. But whether you're in person or Zoom or even on the YouTube live stream today, or some way that we cannot even imagine, a way of being together worshiping together is a chance of deepening our connection with the sources of meaning in our lives, and to proclaim who we are and what we are about, throwing open the doors of our congregation and proclaiming the radical love and welcome that is the heart of our faith. At this time, I'd like to welcome Judy Hart from the Board of Trustees, who would like to offer her own welcome and give us a few announcements.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning. Good morning. We made it. We got here. Yay. I'm Judy Hart. I'm the president of your Board of Trustees. And why that's important, I'll share with you in a minute. I want to offer a special welcome to those of you who are here for the first time or for returning after many years. It's so good to have you all here in this room. I have a few announcements to share as our church community extends beyond the Sunday morning worship. So just in time for the holidays, we are about to have a handmade harvest here in this building. It's November 8th and 9th. And why we made these postcards is so that you can share them with your friends and say, you know what, it's really important that you come and support our local makers. So if you please take some postcards, hand them out to friends. Anybody who's a vendor from our church who's in the room. We have friends who are members of our church who will be showing their work for sale. So please join us November 8th and 9th. It should be fun. So save the dates for the Trans Week of Remembrance. We'll have a special service on Sunday, November 17th, including the Star City Choir. And then third Thursday this month will be a movie called Disclosure on November 21st. So over the last weeks, you have heard from very passionate church members about why they pledge to this church, why it's significant, and why they choose to invest their hard-earned money and time in this faith community. So thank you for all the people who are willing to stand up here and say, this church matters. So here's a question. Does anybody know what a trustee is?
Yes.
What is it? Mary?
Somebody who holds something in trust on behalf of others.
Someone who holds something in trust on behalf of others. And then can give it out, which is important. Anybody want to add anything to a definition of a trustee? That was pretty good. So, our bylaws tell us that the Board of Trustees represents the congregation and provides ongoing leadership and governance of the church. So I think that's the taking in and the giving out. So, but I want to acknowledge a very special group of trustees on this day of remembrance. These are the giants whose shoulders we stand on. If you're in the room and you see your name on that list, could you please stand up or raise your hand? These are the people who have served as the leader of the trustees over the last 50 years, right? We often hear Arla Lee's name mentioned during the time, what is that called? Joys and Sorrows, thank you. Elle Stratman over here, Emily Shatil, Linda Brown back there. This is a really remarkable group of people who are the pillars on which we stand. Thank you. We have a big vision here at the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. We aspire to be a loving community, uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and the world. Anybody else who has served on the board, would you please stand? I would say that almost everybody in this room has either stood up or raised their hand. So can we give all of the board presidents and the board members a round of applause? Why I say that,
He's back at RGL.
I know, Tom Winter is here today also. Does that list surprise anybody? No, it's just, but that's 50 years of leadership. We couldn't put all the board members on there, it didn't fit. But what happens next with all the pledges that you've made during this pledge campaign is the Board of Trustees puts the numbers together and decides how we're going to, as Sandra said, how we're going to give it out. So how are we going to use your pledge dollars for operational expenses next year? So please, if you haven't returned your pledge letter, please do. 22% of the letters that have been sent have been returned. So we have, we're missing about 75%. So you've got till October 31st. So please return your pledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judy. As she said, the Unitarian Church of Lincoln aspires to be a loving community, uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and our world. We have a big vision here, and we know that creating a loving community begins with welcome. So whether this is your first time or your 500th time, if you came here hopeful or heartbroken, whatever your age, gender, skin color, whomever you love, you are welcome here. And we enter into worship. Take a moment to center yourself in this place. Find a comfortable place with your body. Take a few deep breaths. And let's continue into worship with our chalice lighting. So our chalice lighting words today come from Reverend Marta Valentin. We come together today. We come together today to honor the universal community of seekers to which we all belong. We gather together today to share from our deepest place of safety, that we might nurture ourselves by celebrating one another. We call into our presence this hour our ancestors whose love, labor, and commitment made it possible for us to be here now. Let us call one another to the table of abundance, that we may be free, that we may feed on those fruits that sustain us and ever ask us to grow. Let us open to this moment with hearts that have no borders. We light this chalice in honor of all souls gathered here, in our presence and in the great beyond. If we can now please rise in body and soul spirit for our opening hymn to make a joyful noise, hymn 146, Soon the Day Will Rise.
Good morning. I am Kim Zeman. I am the head of our Religious Growth and Learning Committee, and I am filling in for Chelsea Krapka, our Religious Education Director today. Our story for Time for All Ages today is called Desert Song by Lekan Zaya Kemp, illustrated by Beatriz Gutierrez Hernandez. The sun rules in the desert, telling us when to rise and when to sleep. The sun sits atop the mountain while cracklings snap and hiss on the stove. The sky blushes and it's time for tea, for porch swings and belly rubs. And when night comes, so do the coyotes, the cicadas, and the giant barn owls. They howl and buzz and hoot, a chorus in need of a band. It starts with a soft tapping, Uncle Eduardo drumming his hands against his dusty jeans. Aunt Ophelia presses her lips to her flute, calling down the wind. My cousin Tiago beats the leather hide of his hand drum. My sister Esme joins in next, shaking her maracas and mimicking the rattlesnakes sleeping beneath our feet. Over it all, my father begins to hum, while Grandma plucks the strings of her guitar, hands moving slow, nodding for me to follow along. Like this, she says, showing me where to put my fingers. Mine is smaller, with only 5 strings, but I practice it every day after school, waiting for nightfall, for the stars, for my own chance to shine. The sound of my grandfather on El Guiro matches the cricket's song, a twilight harmony that warms us from inside out. When my mother opens her mouth to sing, a hush falls over the desert. The clouds move, drawn back like curtains, and on the other side, I see the moon, giant and watchful, a memory of the sun. Mommy sings about memories too, about the coyote remembering the stars, about the cacti remembering the rain. Soon, everyone is singing. Between us, flames dance, sometimes for making shadow puppets, sometimes for roasting marshmallows, always for telling stories, like the ones we write together with old instruments and even older memories. That's why we play, my father says, with your great-great-grandfather's vihuela and my godmother's ocarina, to remind us they are still alive between the notes. That when we sing to them, they are listening. I listen too, to the animals rejoining our song, nightbirds warbling, wild bees buzzing, and horned toads skittering across the sand. My father lets out a loud grito. The coyote calls back with a loud grito of its own. All of us looking up, searching for familiar shapes in the stars. All of us remembering something, someone. We play to the glittering sky overhead, an audience of our ancestors. Face turned up, I breathe in the faint smell of rain. Lightning strikes like a spotlight. Thunder rolls like a hollow drum. And the rain on our tin roof sounds like applause. Our ancestors still with us. And that is the end of our story. I invite our children to come back. We will be decorating pumpkins for raising money to donate to UNICEF.
Thank you, Kim. And good morning, Lincoln. My name is Reverend A.J. Galazin. I'm your interim minister. My pronouns are he and his, and wherever you are on your spiritual, ethical, or questioning journey, you are welcome here. Our theme for October is deep listening. We began the month with an invitation to listen for meaning in these noisy times. We followed by listening for apologies and offering forgiveness. Last week we listened for the cracks in the walls and wondered if we needed to be builders or maintainers, or both. And today we end the month as we listen to our memories by returning to the Feast of All Souls, when the thin veil between this world and the next is lifted for a brief moment. Reverend Selena Fox, the senior minister of Circle Sanctuary in Wisconsin, writes, quote, "As October turns to November, thousands of witches, Wiccans, Druids, and other pagans across America, Canada, Europe, and elsewhere observe the sacred time of Samhain. Samhain is a festival of the dead, meaning summer's end. Samhain is a celebration for the end of the harvest and the start of the coldest time of the year. For many practitioners, Samhain is also the beginning of a spiritual new year. With the growth and spread of Christianity as the dominant religion throughout Europe, Samhain time took on Christian names and guises. All Saints' Day, or All Hallows, on November 1st, commemorated Christian saints and martyrs. All Souls' Day on November 2nd was a remembrance for all souls of the dead. And with the coming of Christian Spaniards to Mexico, the indigenous customs of honoring dead at this time of year mixed with Roman Catholicism to give birth to the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, in early November. Samhain shares the ancient spiritual practice of remembering and paying respects to the dead with these related religious holidays of Christianity. Close quote. Today, we continue this ancient tradition in our own Unitarian Universalist way. We claim the proud heritage of our Universalist ancestors who preached that forgiveness was better than damnation, and that all souls are on this journey of life together. From the poet Mary Oliver. As deep as I ever went into the forest, I came upon an old stone bench, very, very old, and around it a clearing. And beyond that, trees taller and older than I had ever seen. Such silence. It really wasn't so far from a town, but it seemed all the clocks in the world had stopped counting. So it was hard to suppose the usual rules applied. Sometimes there's only a hint, a possibility. What's magical sometimes has deeper roots than reason. I hope everyone knows that. I sat on the bench, waiting for something. An angel, perhaps, or dancers with the legs of goats. No, I didn't see either, but only, I think, because I didn't stay long enough. The Protestant Reformation was a time of fiery, sometimes violent argument between Catholics, Lutherans, and Calvinists. Contemporary Unitarians claim Michael Servetus as an early witness to the theology of the unity of God with the publication of his book On the Errors of the Trinity in 1531. This book angered both the Catholic Holy Inquisition and John Calvin's Reformed community in Geneva. Servetus was captured by Calvin, tried, convicted, and burned at the stake as a heretic on October 27th, 1553. What's the date today? Yeah. October 27th. More than 5 centuries later, there is now a small memorial near where Servetus was martyred. It was built, quote, by the spiritual heirs of John Calvin, close quote, also known today as the Presbyterians, and serves as a confession and apology for the tragedy, a monument to the freedom of conscience in religious matters. I guess it's never too late to say, I'm sorry for your loss. Like Mary Oliver, I love waiting for angels. I love wandering around cemeteries. Wherever I travel, I make sure to visit an old graveyard, to spend a few moments on a stone bench, waiting for something to appear. I like cemeteries because they're open 365 days a year. You don't need an invitation or a reservation. You don't even have to know anyone there. There's always someone to welcome you. Come as you are, alive. I love St. Genevieve, Missouri. Founded in 1735, St. Genevieve is the oldest permanent European settlement in the state of Missouri. It was originally founded by French Canadians, and it reminds me of the little towns in Quebec. And I'm surprised to just find out that a small part of southeast Nebraska was also part of New France. And I don't know if Lincoln was in New France or not. No? Just on the edge? So I walked around the old cemetery in St. Genevieve and marveled at the weathered stones. The cemetery stopped receiving new burials in 1881. And the sign said there were 300 remaining monuments, but over 4,000 recorded burials. Lesson: it's up to the living to tend to the dead. Not everyone is remembered equally. Years ago, I was passing through Springfield, Illinois, hoping to visit the tomb of Abraham Lincoln. Unfortunately for me, it was Thanksgiving Day, one of the few holidays when the tomb is closed. So instead of a throng of visitors, I found myself all alone in Oak Ridge Cemetery. It was a bone-chilling, freezing day with overcast skies and swirling leaves. So I pulled my hood up and walked around the tomb, aware of some impending presence. And it was then that I was greeted by a murder of ravens crowing down at me from above. I was no longer alone. And since then, I've come to expect that birds and cemeteries flock together. In Texas, I was drawn to a 20-foot-high angel of mercy looking down upon a very plain tombstone. Intrigued at who should have such an elaborate monument, I discovered it was a young mother who died in childbirth, her infant daughter buried right next to her. I expected to find the bereaved father somewhere close, and I searched without any luck. There's no doubt much more to that story. On a lighter note, in Ames, Iowa, I found a headstone with the heartfelt inscription, "Thanks for stopping by." I love that sentiment. Both the living and the dead appreciate an unexpected visitor. Here in Lincoln, I've already toured your beautiful and historic Wyuka Cemetery and its lovely chapel. I'm sure to return there again and again, always with no plan, just to wander with the spirits. Even closer to home, right here at the Unitarian Church of Lincoln, you have a columbarium outside this sanctuary, a resting place for cremated remains, a gift from Earl and Betty Dyer. And at the close of our service today, you are invited to join an optional processional to the columbarium for a very brief service of memory and respect. All Souls is not a time to declare that the dead have become miraculously better than we, the living. Our remembrances are most honest when we realize our common humanity and we honor the many small blessings that come from every life. I do not believe that relationships end at the time of death. As survivors, we have the power of waiting on that stone bench, anticipating a flash of memory. We each have the power to return to our own past. And on this special day, the Feast of All Souls, we have the power to bring the dead back into our hearts and savor their memories. But remembrances cannot be forced. The dearly departed march to their own time. Today, let us deeply listen for them. Blessed be, may it be so, and amen.
Each week, we take up a collection to support the work of this church and our partners in the community. We do this because just as we all grow from our participation in this community, we all give back through our time, our talent, and our treasure. As this next piece of music from Oscar plays, yep, that's right. You can give by texting UC Lincoln and the amount to 73256, or of course through our offering plates, or also through Realm. So again, if you want to text today, text to UC Lincoln and the amount to 73256. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Well, the first piece that you heard, as I was playing the flute, is called The Path of the Lamas. The idea behind that piece is that llamas have their own ways of getting to a safe location so that they can survive. Llamas make a path to those safe locations. Llamas know where the water is. Llamas know where to simply be happy, I guess. And many of these paths were taken by the Inca people because they knew that they were also going to be safe and also find water and find easier ways to get there. So that was the path of the llama. That was the first piece. This next piece is quite unique. It is La Partida. In English is the retreat. It is a conversation between a small young girl talking to her father, saying, "Dad, why do we have to live?" This is right after the Spaniard invasion to the Inca people. A lot of the Inca people had to flee, had to go, because of many things that happened with that encounter, with that clash of cultures. So the daughter says to the father, "Why do we have to go? You know, our friends, our family, our people, our empires are here on top of this mountain. Why do we have to leave?" So this young girl is angry, practically. In a respectful way, she addresses her dad and the father. A bit bothered, at times, comes back and says, "You know, we are not fleeing, we are not being conquered. This is simply a retreat." Why? Why is that, Dad? Because we're going to come back. We are simply pausing for a moment in order for us to gain strength. But we are coming back. So for now, just follow me. So it's a conversation of this moment in time.
from Wendellberry. We clasp the hands of those that go before us and the hands of those who come after us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms and the larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in a dance, and the larger circle of all creatures passing in and out of life who move also in a dance to a music so subtle and vast that no ear hears it except in fragments. My friends, we are the witnesses. Today, as we approach this time of memorial reflection, we each bring our own fragments to this assembly. And by doing our part, may we create here a circle of everlasting love. And if you are watching us today on YouTube and you would like to share, please type a name and a brief reflection into the chat, and Jason will include. So now is the time to come forward as you are so moved and speak a name, offer a brief reflection, and then place a rock in the chalice. And I shall begin. In my pastor's study in Wisconsin, I have a wall where I post the memorial folders from all the services I've attended. The older I get, the more spirits of the past visit. And I never know who I will remember until they arrive. Today I lift the memory of Hortense McLeod, a dear friend I met in seminary. We meshed immediately. Hortense was a self-described Bible nerd. I was a self-described American religious history nerd. And I hoped that we might form a kind of dynamic preaching duo, her yin to my yang. She was an artist, a theatrical poet, and a nonconformist. I still feel her presence.
I have a picture of my mother who just recently passed away here about 2 months, almost 2 months ago now. And she adopted me. I'm adopted. So I'm very, very, it's very special that they took a chance, I guess, on me and to raise me as one of their own.
I want to lift up the memory of Paul Johnsgaard. He was a dear friend, an ornithologist, and a member of this church. And when I think of Paul, and I think of him often, I smile. And every time I see a bird, it brings back some sort of joint memory of seeing that same species with Paul, and it's a pleasure.
I placed a photograph of Ed and me after we got married. It's really a bad photograph, but it does show how happy we were. and I miss him every day.
This is for my parents, Roger and Patricia Dickinson. If you take the tour of the columbarium, they're out there. I miss them so much. They brought me up in this church, and I'm forever thankful.
This is Rebecca Wall, Orvis and my daughter, who died in her sleep in 1984 at the age of 11. And people at that time, now there's, at the time there was no reason, but there's a condition called Lon-QT syndrome, when you're excited and it happened. But she was a joy, and it was so hard at the time. But she was really a joy. She would say, "I like yucky charms." And she was a dog lover and a horse lover. And she was taking horseback riding lessons. But I think of her every day. But I feel good about it. At the time, it really hurt. And the year she died, there was a school publication that came out for some reason with her picture on it.
I had to choose a slightly bigger rock because it's a group rock. I only had one grandmother and one grandfather growing up. They died not too far apart from completely different situations. But I always knew how much they loved us. My grandmother would come to stay with us in the summers. And I don't know, she was just awesome. And my grandfather, bless his heart, would always take my sister and I Christmas shopping for new Christmas dresses to the mall by himself with us. And my parents didn't get to see them until Christmas Day. So you can imagine some of the really cute things that we picked out. One of mine had a beret. Also, my mom and dad passed within a short time of each other. I have very, very fond memories of them, and both of them passed suddenly, so that was hard to take. And filling in all the other little spaces is the multitude of cats that I've had over the years who are going to absolutely swarm me when I get to my side of the Rainbow Bridge.
I have pictures of my parents and my grandparents, but I would like this rock to represent a friend of mine who was murdered and never got to enjoy life. She was 21 years old. Jackie was a athletic person, a friendly person, a staunch friend, and she came from a huge Irish Catholic family, which they kind of adopted me after my mom had passed. They were my second family and very close to my heart. Of course, I have my family here, which pulled me out of the dredges of darkness and brought me into some light. So this is for you, Jackie. I still love you.
About 10 years ago, Mark passed after 25 years of my life as my boyfriend, then husband, then ex-husband, then maybe gonna be husband again, and then actually maybe gonna be best man at my wedding, really? And best friend in the end. And he's with me all the time. I see his face in clouds and on the window, like he used to leave little smiley faces that were him, and he comes to me all the time. I can't ever forget him and can't wait to see him again. Here's the hearts.
My wife and I had the opportunity to be in Pátzcuaro, Mexico, Michoacán, Mexico, during Day of the Dead. It's a place where everyone, I mean, literally everyone believes that that thin wall is broken on that night. In the cemetery, one thing you don't see is crying. You see rejoicing, because they're visiting their ancestors and their loved ones. And they invited us in with the food, with the families, and really got to participate with that whole event, which was so powerful. And when everyone believes, the power is amazing. So I made an ofrenda for my parents, Charles and Drusilla Wooldridge, whom I had a very rocky relationship with. And at night, in the quiet, in the mountains, in a Strawville house way up in the mountains with my ofrenda, my parents did visit me. And it was a great opportunity because there was forgiveness on both sides. I was an asshole. And they had serious faults. And that opportunity, that was the opportunity for me to forgive them and understand that they forgave me. And that was a very powerful moment in my life. So for Charles and Drusilla.
At my house, I have a picture that's about this big, and on the side of it, I inherited that from my dad. On the side of it is a list of 15 to 20 names, and this is ancestors. And I can't tell you how far back it goes because I just thought about talking about it here and I didn't research it before I came. But to me, I always think of people that I know around me, but then I'm aware of all the way back to the primordial ooze.
I just wanted to lift up the memory of my parents, George and Betty Carpenter. My mother advised me back in the 80s to join this church. And then later on, she decided to follow her own advice, and she became active here too. They're with me every day.
moment. I do have some online people. We have Erica Berkey Rios, Amy Berkey, and deep thanks for all of your hours in service in the classroom, at church, and for democracy. Heather Hillhouse, in memory of Dave, a chosen brother who created a welcoming space for people who didn't feel like they fit in, and created the only coffee beverage I've ever enjoyed. Jeffrey Lusk, our moms, Noreen and Alice. Jamie Radcliffe, in memory of my father, Michael. He died too early, but loved by my mother, Nancy, who made the difficulties of raising 3 kids below 9 seem like a joy. Now, sad, I am for her sadness.
My name is Sandra Zieg, and I lost my 2 dear loved persons, my youngest son, Mark, who was a child here when I joined the church for the first time. So that was a joyous occasion. And then his father died a year earlier, so I had both of them within a year's time, and it was very difficult. Mark challenged us all. He did the super whatever it is race where you run, bike, and swim. And we were there to pick him up at the end of that. He was a chemist. He has a minor in German and math. It's just really the very first time I realized what a bright kid was. He came downstairs to the kitchen. We had a tri-level or split-level home. He said, "I want a drink of water." Hello, this is when they say wah-wah. So he was really early on a truly brilliant kid and the joy of our lives. I mean, all 3 of our boys were joys because they all put themselves through college. One put himself through dental, one put himself through medical school, and Mark was in chemistry and business. Yeah, he had a degree in business. So they all were really kids who worked hard to improve their lives and those around them, and we loved these children so much. And I regret that my husband and my son all died a year apart. I didn't want either one of them to die, but it was a truly hard period in my life, and they were part of this church. And I thank you all for listening to my story.
Hi, this is my second time being here, so probably don't know me, but my name's Michaela, and I wanted to come up and make sure I was here today because I have a 12-year-old son, and starting soon after his birth, we lost many of our close family members, starting with my dad in 2015 and my grandpa in 2015, and then my mother in 2016. This picture is of me and my mom, my son, my grandpa, and my grandma. And we actually just lost my grandma earlier this month after a long battle with Alzheimer's. So even though I'm new here, I just wanted to take this opportunity to honor them and just for the strength of them through me to continue to raise my son with their memories.
So my sister's coming up too. So we were raised in a family of 6, and unfortunately 4 of them are up here. So our parents and our brothers. And while Lynn's coming up, I also put a picture of Nadine up here. Yeah. So Nadine was going to save the world, and she doesn't get the chance. And it's the world's loss. So.
Yeah, this is my brother, and my brother Mark. I'm very sad, but I wanted to share a funny story about Mark that I just thought of.
I took him trick-or-treating about 10 years ago, and he was so excited, and he had his little bucket, his pumpkin bucket, and he'd go racing up to the door, and he'd knock on the door. All of our neighbors knew Mark, and they knew he was special, and he'd knock on the door, and before they opened, he'd say, trick-or-treat. So by the time they opened, he was just standing there. But eventually I kind of was like, Mark, you gotta, get the timing right. And he did. He listened to me and he got it right. He got a big bucket of candy that he never ate, but he shared. He wanted to fill it, and he shared it with the rest of us. And Mark, I love you, and I love you. I miss you every day.
Hi, my name is Jillian. I lost my grandmother last year. She was actually my great-grandmother. This is the blanket that she quilted me when I was born. She embroidered it with my name. She's actually the reason why I'm here. She was a very, very devout Baptist. She was baptized in the 40s in a river when the revivalists came to her town of Damascus, Arkansas. I had an abusive childhood, but she came and stayed the summers with me, and I was really close with her. She always said how proud she was of me. When she was really sick on her deathbed, she held my hand and she said, promise me you'll go back to church. I don't think she meant this one. But she's the reason why I started researching Unitarian Universalism. And now whenever I see hummingbirds, which was her absolute favorite, I always think of her.
This is real short. The reason I came with Mark was because having your church either baptize you or recognize you stands as good as your birthright or U.S. citizenship. So it was very important to me to have this backup for his being a citizen of the United States. So I don't know if any of you know that, but it does stand. Today I brought pictures of my mom and my grandparents, and they were my stars, my planets, my universe, my first 11 years. And then my mother left the family and remarried, and it was a terrible time for me. And my grandparents, of course, were with me. And I think my first 11 years, I was the center of their life, and it was enough really to see me through some very hard times. I was fortunate. I got to reconcile with my mom and my stepfather, too, later in life. I didn't understand them, but it was important
to reconcile, to be with them again. And I guess one of the big advantages of old age is you think back over your life and you didn't understand your parents maybe growing up. But then when you get older, you realize they were human beings and they were people. And they were just different from you. They led different lives. And I'm very fortunate because a couple years ago I started writing my memoirs, and I started working with an object relations therapist. And it's really helped me to understand them and to love them, and I think to love myself even more.
I do have a new one from the YouTube chat. This is from Marcia Cedardahl. Marge and Joe Kinney, my parents, my dear brother Lee, 10 years today, and of course, my beloved Ray.
Thanks to everyone who shared this morning. Our prayer is from Lynn Gardner. Can you hear them? Can you hear the whispers of the ancestors? We remember. Their stories are in these walls, in our bones, in the air we breathe. Their stories are in the touch of a calloused hand, in the melodies of songs that we hum while washing dishes, in remembered faces. We hear the whispers of the ancestors, how their stories touch our lives and call us into becoming. May it be so, and amen.
Now we have a responsive reading. When Death Comes Suddenly by Reverend Dr. Kendall Gibbons. When death comes suddenly, taking just one friend, or in a magnitude beyond our comprehension,
in horror and disbelief we remember.
When bright and innocent lives are cut short without warning or mercy.
In agony and outrage do we remember.
When a long life closes with honor and thankfulness.
In reluctant submission and gratitude we remember.
When bereavement and loss seem to be everywhere we turn and the world goes dark.
In emptiness and pain we remember.
When help and comfort must be given to the afflicted and the work of our hands is needed.
In duty and sacrifice we remember.
When arrangements must be made and the severed threads bound up.
In ritual and custom we remember.
And it feels that nothing matters and life as it once was seems distant and unreal.
In sorrow and numbness we remember.
When grief comes upon us in waves and helpless heart overflows.
In sadness and aching tears we remember.
When words at last become meaningless and the only peace lies inward.
In silence and solitude we remember.
When communities come together and the hurt is shared.
In mutual comfort and consolation we remember.
When a strain of music or a familiar image brings a gentle, wistful smile.
In tenderness and nostalgia we remember.
When the Spirit of life beckons us to lift our eyes to all that remains true and good.
In dedication.
There it is. When the lessons of mutual help and understanding taught by tragedy live on in us to bless the world.
In love and kinship we remember.
When we come to honor those we have lost by learning to cherish more dearly those around us.
In generosity and gratitude we remember.
Amen. So now we have our next hymn. Please rise if you're able to for the hymn number 103, For All the Saints.
From their labors rest,
closing words today are from Reverend Leslie Takahashi. We bring into our hearts all those who have gone before us, all those whose living in this world has prepared the soil for our living, and those whose being has enabled our being. Let us also remember those whose existence is seeded in our lives today, not only those who are physical descendants, but also those whose spirits inherit the love we sow, the hope we reap, and the promise we harvest. And may those of us whose religious inheritance is freedom never rest until all who wish to be its children are sheltered. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And for those of you who wish to join us, we will now begin a procession to the columbarium. Go now in peace.